What we're going to do today is we're going to look at a few useful functions in Excel. We've done some really basic stuff previously, and we've done some mildly advanced stuff as well. But what I'm going to do today is some other basic and advanced stuff, just so that it's kind of caters for every level. So hopefully you can see a very dull-looking Excel spreadsheet there with some invoices listed. And all it takes is one person to nod their head, and I know it's right.
Yes.
Good. That's all I needed. Yeah, this is a spreadsheet we used the other day for doing simple pivot tables. But first of all, as a build-up to talking about Vlookups and hlookups, I'm just going to talk about cell referencing, which if you're familiar with Excel, you'll know anyway. So here we have in A1 the word invoice. Now, if for some reason I wanted to get that information into another cell, all I do is put equals because it's a calculation, well, sort of calculation. And then if I put A1 and hit return, that shows me the contents of A1. Simple. And if I was trying to get the contents of B10 plus the contents of B50, I would say equals B10 plus B50. This is all stuff that I kind of got to imagine you know, but we're going to need this later. So to look at the stuff in this sheet in A1, I'd say equals A1. If I create a brand new tab down the bottom, sheet 7 in fact, and I wanted to look at that stuff that was in sheet 5, no, sheet 4, A1, then to get to that, I would do a very similar thing, but I'd say, I must have made it big enough to read, equals sheet 4, exclamation mark, A1. Hit return, and it gives me the contents of sheet 4, A1. Now, that's handy for calculations where you want to reference stuff that's on other sheets. Now, for example, if I wanted to reference something that was in another document, then I can do that in a similar way. I just got to work out how to move this thing out of the way of the document name. Oh, that's easy. Cool. Those guys at Cisco really know what they're doing. Now, if I... oh, this has got a ridiculous name, stuff for Wednesday. I'm not going to use that. If I create a new document, let's do a brand new blank document. This is called Book 1. And in here, in A1, I type in hello. If I now go back to my previous one, if I want to reference that cell, A1 in sheet 1 in book 1, then all I need to do is say equals, put the name of the document, which should go in square brackets, so that would be book 1, close the square brackets, then the name of the worksheet, which is sheet 1, then an exclamation mark, and then A1. Then when I hit return, get the word hello. Now, obviously with text, it doesn't look very useful or helpful, but if that document contained all the latest sales figures or all the latest pricing structures that somebody else in a different department was working on, and then in my spreadsheet I wanted to get a summary of the totals, or I wanted to extract certain products to find out the price of them, then I can do it really easily. And the nice thing about looking at somebody else's spreadsheet is that you don't have to have that spreadsheet open. They can be updating the figures, and as soon as they hit save, that becomes the current information, and you can be pulling that straight into your document and doing calculations based on it. So it's not very complex. It is just a case of putting the relevant bits in front of the cell reference. So that's the same as saying A1 plus A2. You know, you're putting document name, the sheet name, and then an exclamation mark at the cell reference. Okay, so that'll make a lot more sense when we get onto the Vlookups. And for that, I need sheet 4. And what I don't need anymore is book 1, so I'm going to get rid of that. Do you want to save it? No, I don't want to save it. Just go. Stage, you're welcome. Right. Okay, so here we have a set of data. It's a list of invoices, a very basic list and a very unexciting list. But I can use this for doing Vlookup orientated stuff. There's two very popular commands, Vlookup and hlookup. The Vlookup is for doing vertical lookups. The hlookup, brace yourselves for this, is for doing horizontal lookups. I was going to leave you in suspense for a while, but I thought of something. Now, the The idea of these things is to look at a chunk of data and then say, right, I found the line you're looking for, and then look across and say, this is the figure that goes in that column of that line. Doesn't sound obviously useful, but it's incredibly useful. That's a VLOOKUP, but HLOOKUP does it the other way around. It finds the column you're looking for, and then says, right, I can report the thing that's in row 10 or row 12, whichever row you ask for. Now, people use these in 4 different ways. There's 2 fundamental ways of using a VLOOKUP, which is what I'll cover now, because it's exactly the same as HLOOKUP. There's 2 fundamental ways of doing it, a true one and a false one. I'll come back to that in a minute. And using the false method, which is the most popular, there's 3 main things people do with it. One thing they do is populate data. So, for example, here with this list of invoices, I could have another column on there. That doesn't need to be that wide. I could have another column here that says what the product type is, because already I've got an analysis code, but it's not very meaningful. And although it's great from a from a data storage point of view, I might want a nice little text field on that line saying what that analysis code means. And I could use a VLOOKUP to look at a table of analysis codes, and I could populate this list of invoices with the meaning of the analysis code. That would be one classic use of a VLOOKUP, to populate data. For example, I could have a list of outstanding invoices on a spreadsheet, and I might be doing credit control. So I could use a VLOOKUP to look at another spreadsheet to find the account number, and then deliver the credit control contact name and the phone number. And so somebody could sit there with a spreadsheet, go through all the outstanding invoices, just phoning up Blogs & Co. and all the other companies and chasing them for money. So you can use a VLOOKUP to populate data. You can use a VLOOKUP to find data. So if, for example, this invoice list was a list of 10,000 invoices and it was stored on somebody else's computer, and I wanted to know what the value of invoice number 1050 is, then I could use a VLOOKUP to extract that data or to search for that data and then pull it back and just give me the answer. And the final thing that people tend to use this type of VLOOKUP for, a false VLOOKUP, that will make sense in a minute, hopefully, is for comparisons. So, for example, if you've got 2 lists of invoices, one's all the invoices and one's the paid invoices, then quite often people will compare the 2 and they'll be able to see which ones are paid on the main invoice file. Invoices isn't a good example, really. It's just an example that everyone knows. So if I talked about trucks that were being rented out or products that are being sold, it might not be quite so vague. It's so vague and understood by everybody. Anyway, I'll crack on. So what I need here is a nice big whiteboard style thing, and then I can show you what the old function looks like. 20, that'll do. That's not big enough. Anyway, so a VLOOKUP looks something like this. Starts with an equals because it's a calculation, followed by a VLOOKUP, and then open brackets. Now, the first thing is, well, the wording for this is really bad. The actual Microsoft wording, let me show you the wording they use. I mean, how could you fail to understand what these things mean? Lookup value, table array, column index number, a range lookup. It all makes perfect sense. But the first thing is basically the thing that you're looking for. So we call it the value. The next thing is the data set or the table array. I'm not suggesting that the programmer who designed this designed it in the 70s, but you know. Then we have the column index number, and then we have true or false. Right, that should just about fit. Okay, maybe not. So there is a whiteboard function in this software, but if I do that, it would just be really messy. So that's my whiteboard now. So the idea of VLOOKUP is to look for something in a data set and then report a column that comes from it. So in here, for example, what I'm going to do is create another sheet that looks for, it tells me what the analysis code is. Yeah, let's do that. Actually, no, first of all, I'm just going to do something here. I can just type in the invoice number in this cell, and then here it will report the value. And I know what you're thinking, that's really useless. You can just search for it. But let's just assume that the invoices were a bit more numerous and they were stored somewhere else. So let's have invoice number 1010. Here, I want to know the value of that invoice. So Vlookup, first thing is look up value. Now, what am I looking for? Now, in this case, I'm going to be looking for that invoice number there. The invoice number 1010 is the one that I want to find out the value of. Then we have table array. Now, by that it means data set, and it basically means from A1 to F18. This bit can be really simple or really complicated, depending on the data set you're looking at. So, for example, with this one, it's easy. It's, you know, A to F. And I can even just say A to F, and that will include every row in column A to every row in column F. And the advantage of that is if I've got a data set that's building up and it's getting, you know, getting bigger and bigger, and I don't want to have to keep adjusting my formula, then by putting it in just A to F, it'll cover all eventualities. The downside is that if I say A to F and then I put some data halfway down the screen doing something completely different, it can screw up my calculation. But in this instance, that would be fine. So the array is the data we're looking at. So if we was looking on a different sheet, we was looking on a sheet called sales, it would be sales exclamation mark A to F or A1 to F200. If it was looking in a different document, like I don't know, a document called invoices, it would be square bracket invoices, square bracket sales exclamation mark A1 colon F100 or whatever. So, like I say, the array bit can be really simple, it can be really complicated, but we'll come back to that. Then we have the column index number. So, for example, here, if I wanted to report the analysis code, I'd ask for this column. If I wanted to report the value, I would ask for this column. Now, the value is what I'm looking for, the invoice value. It's a bad choice of words, really. I ought to change the name of that field. But for example, if I wanted that one here, who'd like to guess what the column I would ask for would be? Go on, somebody. Everyone's got their microphones muted on purpose now. Go on, guess. It would be column 6, obviously. You go, why doesn't someone just say F? But no, that's column 6 because that's how Vlookup works. If that whole data set was all moved over one, so for example, if the data set was over here, then what column would it be? Show your hands if you like. It would be column 6. Now, this is one of the things that confuses people with Vlookup, because they say, why don't they just use the column letters? Well, that's because of the way that, well, I can't justify it. But the thing is, it's the column number within the data set. So if I had a little data set down here, 2 columns, and this one contains something, and this contained the meaning of it, then this would be column 1, and this would be column 2. So that's the understandable and logical stuff. Then we get to the last one. Everyone loves the last one because it's optional. You don't have to put anything in there. If you don't put the last bit of the formula in, it'll default to true. The problem is, for 99% of the time, the actual last bit is the question, do you want this to go horribly wrong? And if you don't set it to false, then it'll go horribly wrong. So you need to put true in there. I'll explain what that actually means later on. But this is what it looks like for anyone who's thinking, just go on. So Vlookup. The value I'm looking up is that one there, that invoice number 1010. So I'm going to say K2, like so. And then I put a comma. And as always, you can see the little helper underneath. And when I put the comma in and move on to the next section becomes bold to show me that I am working on that bit. So it needs a table array, in other words, a data set. And as always, I can just click and drag to select the data, but that'd be no fun. So I'm going to say A1 to F18. A1 colon F18. And you can see it's selected it. Then I'm going to put a comma in to go to column index number. And as we've established, the invoice value is column 6. So I'm going to put 6 in. And see if you can notice a very subtle difference in the little helper here, where they've shoehorned in something because they're sick of getting support calls. 6, and then comma, boom. True or false? True, it'll guess at it. False, it'll do the right thing. Okay, select false. And so you can put 1 or 0, obviously, but if you type true or false, then that's much more exciting. Let's close the brackets and hit return. And hurrah! Invoice number 1010, where is it there? Has a value of £913. And if I change that to invoice, let's say 1012, which is that one down there, then it should give me 678. Hurrah! That's an example of a Vlookup. Useful, huh?
Yeah.
Good. Believe me, it gets better. It does have its uses. I'm going to explain what the true-false means at the end, but I'll explain that at the end. First of all, I'm going to do something slightly more useful. I'm going to create a tab for the analysis codes. So let's do a new sheet, sheet 8. I'm going to call it codes. I was going to call it an abbreviation for analysis, but then I thought that wouldn't be a good word to type in, so I'm just going to put codes. Yeah, just let everyone think about that. So here's the analysis codes. Well, we've got 10 to 13. Yeah, that's easy. Right. Codes. Let's do 10. And I'm going to autofill it down because I'm lazy. And if I autofill that down, that'll give me 410 all the way down to 410, which is not what I want. But what do I do to make sure that the number increases? Hold down the control key, obviously. As previously mentioned. So if I drag that down and hold down the control key, rather than just give me the number, it'll actually increase the number. And we let go of the mouse, let go of the control, I've auto-filled it down the page. So here's the code. Here's the details. And I'm going to just put in some different product types. So I'm going to have books, I'm going to have the phones, TVs, and computers, no, PCs. That involves very little typing. So there's my analysis code breakdown. Now if I go back to sheet 4, which I'm thinking of renaming to invoices because I keep going to almost the wrong one. Yeah, I'm going to rename that invoices by double clicking and putting invoices in there. Right. So I've got invoices and I've got codes. Now, if I want to get those details in here now, what I can do is let's put in another column. Oh, I didn't put the underline automatically, that's rubbish. And in here, I'm going to put a Vlookup. So I'm going to say equals Vlookup. This time the value that I'm looking up is that analysis code. So I'm going to put that in there, and comma. Then the table array, or the data set, is the table in here, which I'm going to manually type in because I could click on it and I could drag and select it, but it won't come across well in the demonstration. Plus, it's not good role model behavior. So I'm going to put in codes, exclamation mark, and then I'm going to say the whole of column A to the whole of column B because I can't remember what it went down to. That would involve some brief thinking. So I'm just going to say A colon B. So what that's saying now is look for this analysis code within the data set of everything in column A and everything in column B on a sheet called codes. Then when you've found a matching analysis code, report a column. And if I report column 1, then that will just give me the information I've got, so I'm going to report column 2. And then if I want to make it work, put the word false at the end. Close the brackets, hit return. And I think that was books. It's books, yay. And then I can drag that down and I'll get all the different types. Or if I'm feeling really lazy, because dragging it down could be far too much hard work, I can just hover over the little autofill and double click. It works better if you haven't got anything else there. Do that again, and double click, ta-da, and there they are. That really isn't very exciting. It'd look better if the data wasn't sorted in that way. But let's sort it by invoice number. That didn't work very well either. Account number. We're just going to sort by account number. Oh, never mind. Okay. The important thing is it worked. So that's how a Vlookup works. You can look for a thing and look for it in a place and report the stuff. Those are all technical expressions. Now, that's the second most popular way of doing it. So like I say, you can have a table that's got information like client details, and you can have another table that's got information just like invoices and account number, and you can bring information from one to the other. It's also useful for things like bringing over details where things sit in a range. So for example, if you're looking at a list of clients and you want to see who takes care of that customer, and they've got a list of postcodes that they deal with, then you can look at their address and assign a rep to them or something like that. And think of that on the fly. Not a great example, but that's one of the things you can do when you do this whole populating data thing. So what I'm going to do now, after I made that look slightly prettier, is I'm going to do the final thing, which is where people use it to make comparisons. So here I've got a list of invoices. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this sheet, and then I'm going to delete some of the invoices, and then I'll be left with all the paid invoices. Okay. So everyone had a quick way of making a copy of a tab down the bottom? Yep, thought so. Okay. Good. The quick way of copying a whole worksheet within a workbook is to click on it and drag it as you would in the normal way. But whenever you drag something in Excel, if you hold down the control key at the same time, you'll see a little plus turn up. I don't know if you can see this on the screen there because it's probably very small, but there's a little plus there. That means I'm not moving it. It means I'm copying it. So when I let go of the mouse and let go of the control key, I've now got a copy. So there's invoices 2, there's invoices, and they're identical. Well, one's identical, but the other one's the same. Anyway, I'm going to change that and call it paid. So these are the paid invoices. Don't need the details on there. Let's get rid of that because that'll just make things complicated. It won't really. It'll just mean that I won't know which sheet I'm on. Let's get rid of all that. These ones haven't been paid. That one hasn't been paid. This one hasn't been paid. I'm trying to be random. Right. These are all the paid invoices. And these are all the invoices. And I want to know whether they've been paid or not. I want the underline to appear on there. Now, I see people use this on a regular basis in the way that I'm going to use it next, which is horrible, but it's effective. Now, I'm going to show you the first sort of raw, horrible version of it, just because, like I say, people find it useful. Then I'll show you how to make it look nicer. So what you can do here is, all I want to do is see if that invoice number appears in this list of invoices. And just to make things wildly more exciting, I'm going to sort this list so it's in a different order. So those are the invoices that have been paid, and these are all the invoices. So I want to look for that number in this sheet, and if it finds it, report the invoice number. And if it doesn't find it, it'll come up with an error message. So like I say, this is a kind of rough, horrible way of doing it, but it's a very popular use of the function. So if I say equals Vlookup, I'm looking up that invoice number. I'm looking at a table array which starts with paid and ends with, well, I can just do column A really, I don't need to do anything else. So I'm going to say paid, exclamation mark, A:(A), comma. The column to report, well, I've only got one column to choose from, so I'm going to report column 1, and then I want it to work, so I'm going to say false, close the brackets, hit return. Okay, so this one has clearly been paid. And if I look in the paid column sheet, I can see, yes, that's been paid. If I go back to this and then drag it down, or double click to drag it down, I can see all these ugly NA ones are ones that are still outstanding. So like I say, this is a way that people use it, and it is ugly and horrible, but at least it's effective. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about VLOOKUPs in a minute. I say we are, unless everyone just disconnects out of boredom. But I'll show you some of the other uses for it. But first of all, I'm going to show you a bit of error trapping, because, like I say, I can't live with a spreadsheet that looks this ugly. So there's a variety of functions we can use for error trapping. There are things like iferror. What's that spell? Yeah. There are things like, don't need to put on that one, isna, and there is also if na. Oh, that would have worked really well if that was the right size. Let me just include another couple of rows in my homemade whiteboard. Good. Okay, so if, for example, you had a calculation where you wanted to add J2 to K2, and you said equals J2 plus K2. Obviously enough, hopefully. When I hit return, you can't add the word invoice to that invoice number, so you get an error message. In instances like this, where there's potential of something coming up with an error, you can use the iferror function. So you just say iferror, open bracket, put the calculation in, hopefully something a little more sophisticated than a calculation as daft as that. Then you put the comma, and then you put what you want to see instead of an error message. So you can put your own specialist error message, which you'd have to put in speech marks. So you can have all kinds of fun if it's other people's spreadsheets, like you can't add words together, you idiot. Or you can just put a value in there. And sometimes all you want to see is either speech mark, so it displays nothing, like so, or just the value 0. Numbers don't need to be in speech marks, but text does. If you don't put text in speech marks, it thinks it's a named range or a function name, and it gets moody. It comes up with an error message. And so that's an example of the iferror function. It's just useful sometimes if you've got a column of figures or calculations where sometimes you're waiting for something to come in, and there's no guarantee that those figures will ever turn up, but you get an error message when you're waiting for them, then an iferror function can just make it look prettier. So that's how that works, really easy. We can use the isna or isna function in this scenario, and we can put it in something like an if statement. So we can have an if statement saying, is it going to show NA? If it shows NA, then it means it's outstanding. If it doesn't, then it means it's paid. And that's really easy, but we'll save that sort of level of sophistication for another day. Or we can just use the if NA function, which is almost identical to the if error. And so rather than saying NA, we can make it say something else. And we do that by just going equals if NA, open brackets, you put the calculation in, so this calculation, for example, and then you put a comma, and then you put in what you want to see rather than the NA. So here, for example, I would say, right, there's the VLOOKUP function, it works absolutely fine, it's doing what it should do, but it's ugly. So if I just put in if NA, open bracket, the value is my VLOOKUP function, which is working a treat, then I can put comma, and then here I can either put in a 0 or a space or just nothing, or I could just put in speech marks outstanding. Outstanding. Close the brackets. Then if I hit return, make sure I haven't done anything wrong there. Yeah, there you go. That one looks fine, and if I drag it down, those ones are still outstanding. So that's an example of making it look less ugly by using the isna function. But if it was mine, I'd be big and clever and using if statement. But I wouldn't expect. That's a bit too much to cover in one go. Actually, no, I'm going to do it anyway. I would say if is NA. We'll come to if statements another day. But using the isna function, I can ask whether that's going to come up with NA. If it is, then it means it's outstanding. I'm not going to put the whole word in again. I'm just going to put OS. If it isn't, come up with the word paid. That'd be a much more sensible thing to do. And now I can see the ones that are outstanding, the ones which are paid. But we'll come through statements another day because they are incredibly useful and they're a big old time saver, but they need explaining properly. So that is about 80% of the things that people are most likely to do with VLOOKUPs. However, there's one last thing to cover which can provide madness if it's not explained, and that is the true-false bit at the end. Now, I would suggest that a good 9 out of 10 people that use VLOOKUP would put false in at the end, or 0, because not everyone wants to type the whole word false. And those people don't understand why anyone would ever use the true version. And the 1 person out of 10 that uses the true version doesn't understand why anyone would ever use the false version. It's a different way of doing it. Now, if I get rid of that false and just put nothing there, hit return, what I'll get is an answer. But it's not the answer I expected. Effectively, it's wrong. It's not really wrong, it's just sort of wrong. And if I try another invoice value, let's try 1010. Oh, same answer again. Let's try 1015. 1015, where's that one? Bom, 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 bom. Yep, completely wrong again. The problem is sometimes it works and then people get confused and think, oh, I've done the right thing. And then they auto-fill it down and then realise they haven't done the right thing because it all goes horribly wrong. So the true at the end, which if I type true in, would give me exactly the same result. What it does is it's asking, do you want a range lookup? They've established in most cases people don't want a range lookup. But what a range lookup is where rather than looking for an exact match, so if I said false, it would say, right, it's got to be that one. But rather than looking for that, it looks to see where the number that you've got, that you're looking for, where it can appear between. Now you're thinking that makes no sense whatsoever. That's only because I've explained it really badly. Let me type in a different number here. That's come up with 493, the value which is there. And this is because by saying yes, I want a range lookup, it's looking for that invoice number, 1010. It's starting from the bottom, obviously, why wouldn't it? And then it goes, oh yeah, 1010, that will appear between 1009 and 1014. And it therefore gives me the value of 1009. And if I type in, let's do 1007, it'll give me 204, which is, where's that? I can't even find it. There it is. Oh, it's giving me the right one. But it all sounds odd. You think, like, why on earth would anyone use that? Well, the reason that they'd use it like that is for things like discount tables. So, I have the quantity and I have the discount. Let's make this bit pretty. All in the appearance. So, if you buy one, you don't get any discount. We're not giving these things away. If you buy 5, you get 10%. If you buy 10, you get 12%. If you buy 50, get 15%. There's great savings to be had. Now this person has gone to buy 3. And actually I should put that somewhere else where it looks less confusing. Down here. And I want to know price, discount, total. So the price for the item is 100. The total will be, I'll get a discount first. So what I'm going to do is look for the quantity of 3 in my discount table, and it will give me 0. Yeah, that's a rubbish figure to use. Anyway, if I do Vlookup, the value I'm looking up is the quantity. The table array that I'm looking in is this table here. The column I want to report is the second column, column 2. And then I can put true at the end, or I can just close the brackets. And when I hit return, I can see you get a 0 discount. Let's make that a percentage, just to really be exciting. If I'd done a VLOOKUP with false at the end of it, it would look for 3. I mean, let me just do 7 so you can see it working. There you go, 7, which appears between 5 and 10, and therefore it gets the 5 units discount. Now, if I'd used false at the end of my VLOOKUP, it would have looked for the value 7 and gone, nah, there isn't a match, NA. But by saying true, it's doing a range lookup. So now, if I say 17, I'll get 12% discount. Okay, so that's the other type of VLOOKUP. That's just to give you the general gist of it. Right, okay, what else have we got? That's pretty much done VLOOKUPs to death. Does anybody have any questions about any of that?
No.
All had enough.
Do you want to go through that again?
Yeah, sure. It might sound exactly like it did the first time, and I'm moving exactly the same ways, because that's good recording.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I expect we'll use that now. What else is yeah, what else is there to cover? Nothing. Yeah, that's VLOOKUPs. Like I said, if you've got any questions about it, then feel free to ask. It's good for getting data out of other sheets as well. What I'll do, yeah, does anyone have any questions about Excel at all? While I've got it on the screen.
Really?
No? Okay.
No, thank you.
I'm not looking at my the chat screen, but yeah, but no. Okay, I'm just trying to think of something really cool to finish with. Flash fill. There's a really good thing. Let me just, what data have I got here? Right, I'm going to just create a bit of data. Right, so let's have some names. Let's Fred Blogs, James Smith. I've run out of ideas now. We'll have Mary Blogs as well. So here we have a bunch of names. It's a great exercise for using text functions on the advanced course that I do, where we use left, right, search, and what's the other function? Concatenate. That's a lovely function to use just by the name of it. We can use that to look at a list like this and extract information. So, for example, I could get the F from Fred Blogs and find the second name Blogs, and I could put it all together with this great big long formula that's really impressive, and that would give me the name F Blogs. And this was a really great exercise that I used to do with people on the advanced course for years. And then in 2013, Microsoft introduced a feature called Flash Fill. Flash Fill completely ruined it because it's really useful. You can do things like F blogs and then think, okay, I just want J Smith, M blogs, and M Smith. And then rather than having to do a complicated, complex, lengthy function, you can just go over on the right-hand side to where it says Fill, click on the drop-down, and go to Flash Fill. And then it does it all for you, which is really useful. And you're thinking, yeah, I'll never use that. Well, how about if you are... I love using this because sometimes it just doesn't work and then it always makes me like an idiot. But if, for example, you were creating email addresses and it was f.blogs@domain.com, and you think, oh man, how am I going to have to go through and type that for every new user? You don't need to type that for all of them. You can use Flash Fill. Is that cool? Yeah. You can do all sorts of things like that. You can have blogs thread. As long as it's enough for it to kind of guess, you go to Flash Fill and it goes boom, and jolly well Flash Fills for you. Anyway, that's my signing off function for today. It's a useful tool, and whenever you're working with text, you can always find a way of speeding it up by using something like that.
Mm.
Okay, good. Yeah. Right, everyone had enough? Tomorrow we'll do some. I think I'm doing charts tomorrow. It'll be in the email anyway. Oh yes, I think tomorrow is when we're going to do charts and tables, taking them out of Excel and putting them into Word, which would be a really useful thing for doing the bit we spoke about earlier, the linking documents. And so that's what I believe I'm doing tomorrow. And had I prepared adequately, I would have looked before doing this. If we end up doing something completely different tomorrow, yeah, we'll just we'll do it a day after. But yeah, I'll put it in the email, or Jackie put it in the email because she loves sending out emails. So so there we go. Good. If you've got any questions, now would be a great time to ask. Otherwise, feel free to make a run for it. But thank you for attending, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. Bye.